Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Casciani.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Living to 100 Club podcast, where we explore the upsides of aging. I'm your host, Joe Casciani. Each week I talk with experts and thought leaders about how to stay positive, resilient, and purposeful. Because growing older isn't just about adding years, it's about making those years count. This podcast is part of my broader Living to 100 mission, which brings together three core pillars. These conversations, offering fresh perspectives on aging, a growing collection of practical tools and learning resources, including my Better, Longer, and Happier card decks, and other evidence-informed products designed for individuals, families, and senior communities. You can explore it all on livingto100.club and livingto100.solutions. Thanks for joining me as we focus on living better, longer, and happier. Let's get started with today's guest. Caring for an aging parent or loved one often brings emotional strain, complex medical information, and the pressure of coordinating support across family members. In today's episode, I speak with Crystal Gallo, CEO and founder of Innerhive, a caregiving support platform designed to bring organization, clarity, and shared responsibility to the caregiving journey. We discuss how Innerhive's automatic note scribing app helps families capture and summarize important care conversations, turning overwhelm into actionable next steps. Crystal shares how the platform supports caregivers across conditions such as dementia and chronic illness, and how it helps families stay connected without adding technological burden. First, a little background. After 15 years building teams and growing high-impact technology companies, Crystal Gallo discovered a deeper purpose in the most unexpected way, through family caregiving. Innerhive was founded and the vision to transform how we care for one another and is on a mission to end caregiver burnout. It's focused on serving caregivers that are providing and coordinating care at home. She and her team are committed to helping anyone navigating care find clarity, connection, and wellness on their journey. Crystal, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. Looking forward to our conversation.
Same here.
What inspired you to create Innerhive, and what gap did you see that families were facing during their caregiving process?
Yeah, I think I imagine this resonates with most that are on kind of purpose-driven or mission-driven journeys. And for me, it was really about just becoming a caregiver myself. You are aware of things around you, but I think sometimes until you're in the thick of it, you're feeling it, you're living it, you don't realize quite how overwhelming or how broken perhaps that system that you're kind of swimming in is. And that's kind of where it started. I mean, I just remember sitting in the neurologist's office and trying to remember everything that was coming my way, understanding the new diagnosis, what we needed to talk about, what was next, if there were questions I should be asking. And largely, I ended up missing most of what was said.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm someone that's quite articulate about taking notes, but feeling so overwhelmed and constantly trying to look between, capture what the doctor's saying, but also understand and be aware of how my mom is feeling. And, to hear that information as someone that's an observer and someone that's extending care must feel very different than someone that's actually going through and navigating it. So it was just all very overwhelming, and trying to just capture that information, know what's next, know if I miss questions.
Mm-hmm.
That really was just the moment where I realized there's a lot to this. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of places. And the more I talked with friends and colleagues, and the more that the awareness became almost, so in my face of this is what so many people are going through. And it's not responsible to suffer in silence. We've kind of normalized that. And really, the more you kind of peel back the layers, the more you recognize it's actually a common denominator. You have a lot of people extending care, starting with, tidbits of help, and it kind of snowballs from there. And then before you know it, you're feeling completely overwhelmed and treading water. And then you start to kind of shut down and feel like you're on this journey
Yeah.
all by yourself. And that isolation is, well, I don't know, they say isolation kills. And I really think there's some truth behind, when you're extending care and you're so compassionate about the person you care for and you forget about yourself. Um,
Sure.
so
Sure.
that was kind of the jump off. That was
Oh,
where we realized, it's so valuable to connect with families. It was the inspiration for Innerhive. We have apps that do everything. They track our steps. I can order coffee. I can,
yeah.
my husband can play fantasy football. We can coordinate, all these different things. But when it comes to our health and safety, we are running on sticky notes and, running around a million miles an hour trying to remember all these pieces or hoping someone else will remember. And when you have conditions like cognitive decline, you often become someone's second brain quite immediately. And so that pressure builds where you don't want to miss any of that information.
Sure.
So
Yeah. So
felt
it's
like,
really, sorry, it's hard to shift from one mode to another. You're a caregiver and you're also an
mm,
information gatherer and you're learning treatment processes and next appointments and all of that. So what you're talking about is that feeling of overwhelmed, being overwhelmed. So describe the note scribing feature. How does that work with Innerhive and what challenges does it solve?
yeah, I mean, that exact scenario, whether it's you're at a doctor's appointment, whether you're at home for care, there's so much information, a lot of critical, important information that is being discussed. And so being able to capture that, whether it's a new diagnosis, medication adjustment, new symptoms to watch out for, maybe some follow-up appointments to make sure that you're tracking and scheduling. All of these things are really important. So if you're trying to listen, you're trying to advocate, and like you just said, you're trying to remember everything, you can't be a perfect note scribe. So if you can leverage technology, and this could be something that is there to allow you to be present, it's kind of ambient, it runs in the background. What's beautiful about it is it captures everything. And so you've got that same baseline of information where when you're bringing and bridging with your share, your community, those that are supporting you, when you can share with them, you're all operating from the same knowledge base. And so
Mhm.
that note scribe is really about a couple clicks, makes it super easy. Let us capture the information. We'll summarize it. We'll organize it into structured notes. So here's what the doctor said about medications. Here's some of the follow-ups that you need to schedule. Here's some specific questions that came up. And you're not just capturing all that and having a reliable record that you can share with families. You're also solving for being able to be present in the appointment instead of panicking, writing everything down. Like you get to be there as a family member, a loved one. And that friction that you just said a minute ago is so real, where you're trying so hard to be, the medical scribe, the note taker, the appointment, the driver, all these things. But
Mhm.
then you forget, I just want to be there and hold my mom's hand and I want to comfort her. And I want to be able to talk through and validate how she's feeling and not feel the burden of all this administrative stuff. I want there to be a system that's going to make that easier.
Sure. Yeah, when I first heard about it, I spoke with you, I thought it was a great program, a great support, a great assistant, so you can gather this information and record it and store it, and it doesn't get lost. So,
Yeah.
as I recall, it does actually transcribe the conversation and put it into some text or narrative that can be saved with that particular visit. Is that how that works?
That's correct. Yep. So you'll have that full kind of, for people that love to look at all the nitty-gritty details, you have that full transcription. You also have that from an audio perspective. So whether you want to read it or listen, but largely what families were telling us was we don't need 20 pages of information. We just need one page. Tell me what the highlights were, where I need to focus. So what are the things that I need to do? And what are the important nuggets that I need to be able to share with family? And that's absolutely what we do when you ask, do you summarize? We put it into tasks. So then you have tasks that say, schedule this appointment, track these symptoms, and then it reminds you. And then that makes it very easy that you can kind of share that record with your family because so much family dysfunction, at least for me, my experience, my observation, my conversations, it starts from this crux of one person largely ends up stepping in and becoming the primary, person that's extending care. And so they're starting to carry this mental load. They're trying to track all this information. They largely feel like, well, I'm the only one that knows what's going on. Well, that's their perspective. You talk to other loved ones or people in the support network and they think, well, I want to help. I don't know how to help. I
Mm-hmm.
ask, or I don't know what's going on. And so when you can start to share and you can start to have these, very transparent, a system where it's one hub, all the information is there, whether it's conversations at the doctor, conversation at home, preferences. It's just natural to have conversation. And so when we can capture that audio first, it brings some of that emotional friction down between families, because you go, oh, hey Joe, I actually do know what you're doing, what's going on with your mom. And wow, I also noticed last week you had a lot of appointments and there was a lot that you guys were processing. I can imagine you probably don't have a lot of time, to be doing some meal prep. So I went ahead and I sent you X, Y, and Z. Or, it's just, it brings empathy into the situation. It makes others feel like they're there. It's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it distills all of that medical information or appointment scheduling or medication changes into a database that can be accessed, not just by family members, but also by other providers, right? Home care agencies, anyone involved in the care of the individual.
Exactly. Yeah. What's beautiful about this is we focused on this being the family's voice, this being the family's ability to say, here's, what is important to me. Here are my preferences. Here are the people in my support network. They can control who they give access to. They really get to, curate their community, so to speak. Whereas largely in the past, what we've seen a little bit of this power dynamic shift where, especially on the medical front, much of that is largely held in the medical professional realm. And I understand to, an extent that a lot of people can't interpret that. And so there's always concern if I misinterpret it. What if there's something wrong? What if something's lost in translation? But that doesn't negate the need for us as individuals to still own our story, to be able to say, I want this person to know, or there's other variables outside of all these data points in medical that contribute to my quality of life. And that was something very important with the design. We really wanted to make sure that we're giving the family a voice.
Yeah. Can you describe the Innerhive feature? Why Innerhive? I mean, how does it apply to Beehive, if that's my recollection? Yeah.
Yeah. So nature junkies over here. Love, I'm definitely a deep thinker. So anything that has some sort of intentionality or deep meaning to it, I'm there. I might lose people. But in this case, the name was really powerful because often people think of, bees as the bee society, the bee culture as worker bees. That's always the term that goes with it. And while that is true, I feel like if you were to peel the layer back and look a little bit deeper, what's really powerful in that bee structure is the way that they organize, the way that they communicate with each other, the way that they have resilience to work through change and navigate. And that at the core is what we really wanted to be able to, offer and to represent in terms of how we holistically work together as a community, as families. So yeah, a little bit of a nod.
It's the interconnectedness of all these different systems that makes it so powerful. That's how I see it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
You're aligned, there's transparent communication, there's, an immense amount of support and trust and respect for each other, and that resilience plays through. It makes it much easier to be able to move through situations effectively and to navigate it with a little bit more ease when you're operating as a unit.
Yeah. Now, I can imagine that the technology might be a little bit challenging for some of the clients that you have. How do you help them enter the system and make it less technological or less stressful?
Yeah, actually, this was one of our biggest design challenges because twofold. We know that we're working with caregivers who tend to be pretty stressed, pretty exhausted, and many of whom are not necessarily tech savvy. And so to adopt a new tool can be a high bar. And so we knew immediately that if we can create something that didn't require a huge learning curve, so quickly record an appointment, get useful notes, that's immediate value. If we knew that it could reduce their mental load, not add to it, so, hey, you're not going to enter 50 different data points. We're actually going to let you speak, which is a natural way of capturing conversation. And the platform's going to organize it for you. And then we also knew, having talked with families, so many people are on the go. You're just constantly transient and you're moving about. So it was really important to make sure that this was something that could be captured from your phone, because we knew that families are often in waiting rooms, they're in parking lots, they're on their couch. I mean, it needed to fit into those small slices and margins throughout the day. So there were a lot of really intentional design components that we thought of, certainly on the front of meeting families where they're at. Some families go immediately all in. They use all the features. Others are like, right now, I just have all this information and I need to find clarity. So I'm going to focus on capturing the information and I'll expand from there. And there's no right or wrong. We just want to give families the
Sure.
tool that's going to make their life easier. Let them, figure out what works best for them, no matter where they're at in the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important that you had those considerations in mind when you designed it, because it's one thing just to create a powerful app, but for you to have different aspects, different bridges for people to tap into it without a tremendous learning curve required. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're already going to appointments, you're already tracking medication, you're already
Yeah.
coordinating with family.
Yeah.
So if we can just capture that information in a way that's useful and,
Hmm.
we're not adding, we're not,
Yeah.
asking you to do anything more, that's
Yeah.
something that's powerful. We actually had a user, we have families that we work with, and largely a lot of our families tend to be in that 40s, 50s, 60s. They're
Mhm.
oftentimes a sandwich generation in that they have their own family and children, and then they're either helping a partner or a parent. And so we were working with this one family, and the woman was like, "Hey, I am embarrassed to say this. I'm in my 50s. I know I'm late to the game, but I still have a flip phone."
Mhm.
And she's like, "This probably isn't going to work for me." And I was like, "No, you don't need to have the latest, greatest technology. You can still, use voice first recording. Um, it's super easy. Let me just show you. I'll walk you through." And so met with the family, met with her. She ended up using it at one of her first appointments. And then after, she followed up and she was like, "I was so stressed out and nervous because technology can be overwhelming, right? You can
Sure.
you can develop this emotional wall of I can't do it, or it's too much, or." And she was like, "That was magic. I actually remember to ask my questions because I wasn't trying to write everything
Oh,
down.
yeah.
I was
Great.
able to just let this run." And so those are the
Yeah.
moments where it's like, okay, I know we're designing right. We're not going to get it perfect out of the gate, and we're still going to iterate. And so, don't take it as we don't have any challenge still. We certainly
Mhm.
do.
Sure.
But being able to listen and make those
Mm.
small shifts,
Yeah.
just that momentum feels powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, as you just said, it allows the person to concentrate on the content rather than
Mm.
worrying about how to remember it, how to record it, how to get it
Yeah.
right to tell them their siblings or other family members. So you've been doing this now for some time. What medical conditions seem to lend itself to using this? In other words, which types of medical problems do individuals have where families really benefit the most from, if there are any?
Yeah, that's a great question. I shouldn't chuckle. I chuckle because it was very much largely designed, and the primary family that gets the greatest value is the one that has the greatest degree of complexity. And right now, largely with the growth and the uptick in, what's happening in our culture within the US in terms of aging, individuals outpacing youth in terms of cognitive conditions,
Mhm.
accelerating. So dementia and Alzheimer's has been so powerful because memory is literally the challenge. And so when you have a reliable record of what was discussed, what behavioral changes
Mhm.
happen, when you can see the progress over time, when you know what the care plan is, I mean, that's gold. And so
Mhm.
those are the families that are getting the greatest degree of benefit from this because it is, I feel like the burnout hits so much deeper. And the data, I mean, the data supports it. When you look at the data, people that end up caring for someone that has a cognitive condition such as dementia, on average, statistics say it takes 5 to 7 years off of your life because
Mhm.
the complexity is so massive in terms of how many people. But beyond the transactional and logistical stuff, what people I think sometimes forget is with these conditions, it's different for everyone and it changes. And
Sure.
every day is different. So you're not just having to manage all of these variables, you're actually having to understand, like, how do I shift my communication? How do I behave differently? How do I not negotiate, but hear and meet them where they're at so that I live the moment with them, not force them to be in my moment. I'm meeting them where they're at, and like those things, trying to navigate and go through that and be a second brain. It's the burnout almost hits deeper. So
Mhm.
number one, family for sure, cognitive, and then largely what we see is anything that has chronic condition management. We see a lot of like diabetes, cardiac conditions, COPD.
Mhm.
Basically, when you have multiple specialists, you have multiple medications, you're constantly tracking progress over time. So it's a journey that you want to understand, what's happening, who's involved. When you can capture that information and, have everything in one place, it becomes more valuable because you can
Mhm.
start to having more information doesn't mean it's better insight,
Yeah.
but But better insight does come from being able to use that information appropriately. So what are the patterns that we're seeing? What's the information we can use to make informed decisions?
Mm-hmm.
So that's largely where we see it, but it applies to everyone. I mean, we all have conversations, and crazy enough, we're capturing Zoom meetings when we meet for work. We're going out. We have our law enforcement that's capturing action that's happening on the streets. We have home security stuff that's capturing movement in our yards. We are capturing information everywhere. It's just what's the most critical information we should be thinking about, and then how should we be thinking about the information? Let's not just check boxes. Let's think about the richness of what is the information I need to be able to know, can I get in front of this? What's a leading indicator, or maybe what's a lagging indicator? And post-hospitalization, that's huge. There's constantly a flurry of follow-ups and rehab and wound care, and oh my goodness, the schedules of what's happening. And those first few weeks at home are critical. So, it can be chaotic, and any situation where you're coordinating care and there's a lot to track, that's where you can have infrastructure. That's where you can have a system that can reduce. And sometimes it's just start before you think you need it.
Well, it occurs to me also, as you say, that these conditions are not stagnant, and they're always progressing, usually for the worse, but sometimes there is improvement and recovery. But I can see the advantage to try to stay ahead of the game rather than always trying to catch up. And that's what this allows the family caregivers to do, I think, to stay on top of everything, because they don't have to remember all of it. It's in your database, it's in the system. It also occurs to me that this may be useful for families who are caregiving for younger adults or children, right? Do you have clients that are maybe children, different medical conditions or diseases?
100%. Our number one family that we work with, when I had made reference to fancy little term sandwich generation, it's really just those of us that, people that have children and people that have parents, and they're coordinating care for their own family plus their parents. And what we're seeing is there's a lot that have children with a medical complexity, and it mimics conceptually the same situation as what you're often seeing with an adult. It, in some cases, could be even more difficult, right? Because you haven't had a life, you haven't had decisions and independence and preferences yet. They're still developing. So we absolutely see that. And then what we're seeing that's kind of an emerging trend is families that are in a caregiving situation. So they're extending care for their loved one. They have children that are witnessing, and they're going through and seeing this journey. And there's still research happening. And so this is certainly, my opinion based on when I've talked with families. But it seems that families have represented, my children were in a good, healthy place. We collectively as a family were in a good, healthy place. But we've been doing this care, and we're now 2 years deep, and my children are starting to struggle. They're, I don't believe that everything needs to have a label, but largely these days, we use the word mental health a little bit loosely. It kind of captures a lot of different things. So I'm hearing families say, I don't know if they're struggling to process their own emotion. I don't know if they're struggling because they're seeing me burn out and I'm having a hard time, and it's impacting how I'm parenting and showing up for them. I don't know what it is, but my children are now really having a difficult time, and I'm now have a new situation that's been introduced. And so that adds additional complexity, and you want to be able to track that all in one place and have it at your fingertips. So yeah, you're spot on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not a loose end anymore. I mean, for families where new systems start to show signs of cracks, or maybe there's some new stresses, it's not a loose end because it can all be collectively put together in this system. I think it's just beautiful. I also think it's important to show the benefits, outcomes of systems like this. What kind of findings are you coming across with families? And I'm sure you get a lot of anecdotal reports, but are you studying the stress level? Are you studying burnout? Are you tracking any metrics on this stuff?
We're still in the early days. So largely the first year we really spent focused on talking with families, connecting, making sure that the product was delivering value. And this year we've spent trying to understand, okay, what does that value mean? How are they interpreting it? And largely there's almost this logistical transactional piece. So it's how much time can we save? What does that look like in terms of being able to be present? And can this reduce errors and incidents? Because when you have missed information or missed context. Largely what happens, especially in the professional realm, I mean, if they don't have some of this information and if the family's not able to track it and or share, and that's not a bi-directional, the communication is flowing, 40% of the time incidents happen because the information is missed, because you didn't have it, there's
Mm.
miscontext.
Mm.
So when we start to learn, like, okay, can we close that gap first and reduce incidents? We know that that's a leading indicator to burnout. And
Mm.
we know that family caregivers and professionals, just professionals alone, went from 65% to 79% this year.
Mm.
They're just they're going through the same thing that families are.
Mm.
They're proxying, they're just a professional navigating the same thing. And so it's like, let's help them create the system and the infrastructure. Let's reduce the incidents. Then we can actually open the door and have the conversation, as you alluded, in terms of like emotional burnout. But we can't
Mm.
quite jump there right away. We have to be
Yeah.
able to give them a tool to get through, to reduce the
Yeah.
burden, the hours, to let them be present, reduce the errors, stop the incidents. And then you're having less of these micro, razor blade cuts, so to speak, that are adding up. And it's a million little things that just compound and create this burnout. And so that is our end goal. We are intentionally focused on wellness for both the caregiver and care recipient, but we're looking at it as a chain reaction. If we can bring clarity, allow connection, bring in support, that right there is kind of the sweet spot to figuring out how can we promote and advocate for someone's wellness.
Yeah, that's very insightful because you're talking about, I think, the quality assurance or quality management aspect of this, where you track gaps or you track missing pieces, and you can look at the last 6 months or whatever and see what's lacking in the system, and you can fix that, and then you can monitor the progress from there. I think um, you're making some smart moves. What's your vision for community support? I know we talked about having some plans in Santa Barbara where you're located. Do you have any plans for a community connection?
I mean, our vision is pretty ambitious. If we want to end burnout, we really recognize that technology can't do that alone. So we're really looking at who are advocates in the community, what are, different organizations that might be nonprofits, who is a home health organization that again is like this proxy caregiver going in and supporting the family. There's caregiver coalitions we're talking to. So yeah, the idea is to meet caregivers where they're at. We know whether it's through their home care agency, whether it's through a local support group, whether it's through a community resource center, we're trying to understand what are the different entry points, because we know that it's difficult when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes you don't think, let me go here, let me learn a new tool, or let me talk to this person, or let me try technology. Like, you're not thinking that way largely. And so we're trying to meet them where they're at. And Innerhive really needs to be part of a broader ecosystem. And so it's not just like this one siloed impact. It's our community. It's our entire workforce. It's our entire, like, the care economy is huge. It's not just a private family matter. So I want to have influence, whatever that looks like, in terms of policy change, employer support, local community groups. But yeah, we're trying to start local. We're trying to really understand, how can we have that impact here? What are the different channels, areas, where are families going, and how can we meet them there?
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. Good for you. So for a listener, how can he or she learn more? What's involved in the sign up? What kind of information? Can you talk a little bit about the cost of accessing your system?
Of course, the best option is just to go to our website. So it's innerhive.com. It's one word. So think inner circle, but of course, a little spin on the beehive. So INNERHIVE.com. You can go there. You have the ability to do a free trial. You can start using it immediately. We do have a free version. We find a lot of families just give them the basics to kind of help them get through. And the paid version that we have is $10 a month or $100 a year. And that was largely built from a lot of community input from families who have said, I'm on this journey, again, chronic condition, cognitive. It's not something that you just have surgery and you rehab and you're good in a month. This is ongoing. And so they've really been vocal about asking for features that are richer, that are going to help them sustain. So unlimited recordings, unlimited document storage, unlimited care recipients, it gives you that ability to think and plan more holistically. So if anyone's out there and listening and thinking maybe this isn't for them, or maybe this feels overwhelming because it's associated with technology, I don't know, just start by thinking about what one piece of information can you organize? Is it the medication list? Is it a shared calendar? Like even just some micro little
Sure.
piece that you chip away at is a step in the right direction. And if you give yourself permission to use a tool that will kind of make this journey easier, I think it helps you understand that you don't have to do this alone. We deserve to have a system and infrastructure. There's a lot of complexity. This is really difficult. So, don't use sticky notes and duct tape to get through. It doesn't work. I tried it.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
It can be inundated with sticky notes, can't we?
Yeah.
So start small. That's basically
Yeah.
the recommendation, to start small and to tackle things one at a time. So this is great information. Crystal, can you maybe give us the takeaway? What would you hope our listeners remember from this conversation today?
Oh man. Most of the world out there at some point is extending care or will be receiving care. So I think really giving yourself the space to understand what that entails, having a little bit of compassion and empathy. I think the spectrum of emotion is real, and it's okay to feel that and to sit with it, but just remember you don't have to do this alone. Whether it's finding community, whether it's finding an outlet to voice and express your opinions through journaling, whether it's finding tools to just bring you clarity and capture information, there are systems and supports in place to make this journey easier, because it's so easy to be so embedded in care that you absolutely forget about yourself, and information falls through the cracks, but so do caregivers. So self-care is frustrating. Hearing that is very irritating sometimes. So it's like, just start small, but also just give yourself the grace to try new things that are going to support you.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it all at once.
Yeah, no, that's good. Caregivers do put themselves last very often. We know that. So
Yeah.
instead of feeling overwhelmed and overburdened, take the initiative and tackle this startup. Go to innerhive.com, try the free version or sign up for the paid version. But either way, start small and learn the benefits. Learn the benefits. Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. Well, looks like we're out of time. Our time has flown by. Thanks for sharing your insights and expertise. And to our audience, thank you for spending part of your day with us. If you'd like to continue exploring the upside of aging, here are 3 easy ways to stay connected to living2100.club. It's got our full library of podcasts and blogs and resources on aging well. You can join the conversation at living2100.community, where members have access to live events and expert discussions. And for professionals and others looking for practical tools, visit my website, living2100.solutions. A lot of resources and information there. Crystal, thanks so much again for being part of our program. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Stay positive, stay inspired, and keep thriving.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Great. You're most welcome.